In the last 223 years, 10 U.S. presidents have chosen to be buried at home rather than in a cemetery or other public place. And one president who's still living has already made plans to be buried in the front yard of his home when the time comes. Keep watching until the end if you'd like to find out who will be the 11th president to be buried at home. George Washington was the first president of the United States and also the first U.S. president to be buried at home. He died at the age of 67 on December 14, 1799, and was buried at his home in Mount Vernon, Virginia, which is less than 20 miles south of the White House. His home is an historic landmark, as well as one of the most popular tourist destinations in the country, and his final resting place is one of the most popular and most visited gravesites in the world. Thomas Jefferson was the third U.S. president, and he died on July 4, 1826, at the age of 83. He was laid to rest on the grounds of his famous Monticello plantation in Albemarle, Virginia. Like Washington's Mount Vernon, Jefferson Monticello is one of America's historic landmarks and one of the country's most popular tourist attractions, and that includes his gravesite, which is located just yards away from the mansion. James Madison was the fourth U.S. president, and he died on June 28, 1836, at the age of 85. He was buried at his Montpelier plantation in Orange, Virginia, which is less than half hour away from Jefferson's Monticello plantation and grave. 7 U.S. presidents are buried in the state of Virginia, and 3 of them chose to be buried at their homes. Like both Washington and Jefferson, Madison is buried in a small family cemetery along with his First Lady and other family members. And like the others, the historic mansion and gravesite are open to the public to visit during certain hours, and tours are available. Andrew Jackson was the 7th U.S. president, and he died on June 8, 1845, at the age of 78. He's buried at his Hermitage plantation, which is located less than 15 miles east of downtown Nashville, Tennessee. Like the others, the grounds, the mansion, and the graveyard are open to the public for a fee, and tours are available. In addition, the Hermitage also includes a history museum. Rutherford B. Hayes was the 19th President of the United States, and he died on January 17, 1893, at the age of 70. He's buried here on the grounds of his Spiegel Grove home in Fremont, Ohio, which is also where he died. His children donated the property to the state of Ohio in 1909 in order to establish the nation's first presidential library. There are now 2 different types of presidential libraries. Those that are operated by the national government through the National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA, and those operated by private foundations, historical societies, and state governments, like the Hayes Presidential Library and Museum. In addition to his home, library, and museum, Hayes's gravesite is also located here on the property. He is laid to rest with his wife and First Lady, Lucy Hayes, who also died here at Spiegel Grove. Herbert Hoover was the 31st President of the United States, and he died on October 20th, 1964, at the age of 90. He's laid to rest here at the Herbert Hoover National Historic Site in West Branch, Iowa. His library, museum, and gravesite are located on the property of the home where he was born. Of the 10 presidents who were buried at their homes, 4 of them, Hoover, FDR, LBJ, and Nixon, were also born in the homes they're buried next to. Franklin D. Roosevelt, also known as FDR, was the 32nd U.S. president. He died on April 12, 1945, at the age of 63. He's buried here on the grounds of his Springwood home, which is now the Franklin D. Roosevelt National Historic Site in Hyde Park, New York. Located here on the property is his presidential library, which in 1941 became the very first presidential library to be operated by the federal government's National Archives and Records Administration. No admission fee is required to visit his gravesite. The same goes for the gravesites of Madison, Hayes, Hoover, Eisenhower, and LBJ, at least during my visits. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the 34th President of the United States. He died on March 28, 1969, at the age of 78. He's buried here on the grounds of his home in Abilene, Kansas, and the site is now the Eisenhower Presidential Library, Museum, and Chapel. His gravesite is located inside the chapel, and the doors to the chapel are locked except during visiting hours. When I visited, the chapel was closed on Sunday and Monday, and I had to return on Tuesday after 10 a.m. to gain admittance. Lyndon B. Johnson, who is also known as LBJ, was the 36th U.S. President. He died on January 22, 1973, at the age of 64. He's buried in the Johnson Family Cemetery, which is located on his Stonewall, Texas ranch. It's also the site of his birthplace home, and you can actually see the home where he was born from his gravesite. LBJ's Presidential Library and Museum is located in Austin, Texas, but there's also a presidential museum here at the LBJ State Park and Historic Site, along with his home and gravesite. Richard M. Nixon was the 37th U.S. President. He died on April 22, 1994, at the age of 81. He was laid to rest here in Yorba Linda, California, just a few yards away from the home where he was born. The property is now the Richard M. Nixon Library and Museum. Not only was this his birthplace, but it was also his childhood home. And of all the presidents buried at home, his gravesite is the one that's located the closest to his home. It's just feet away from the bedroom where he was born. It's relatively rare for famous people to be buried at home, which is one reason the gravesites of these 10 presidents are so unique. All of the first ladies are buried with their husbands. Some of the first ladies also lived in these homes, except for Nixon and Hoover, who are buried at childhood homes. President Andrew Jackson's wife, Rachel, died after he was elected president, but shortly before he was inaugurated, so she never served as First Lady. But they're still buried together at their Hermitage home. Jimmy Carter was the 39th U.S. President, and he's currently 98 years old. He's also the very first president to have been born in a hospital. All 38 presidents before him were born at home. And though he wasn't born at his home in Plains, Georgia, that's where he plans to be buried when the time comes. According to his website, he's already made plans for his funeral to be held in Washington, D.C., then for visitation to be held at his Carter Center in Atlanta, Georgia. He will then be buried in the front yard of the home that he shared with wife and First Lady Rosalind Carter since 1960. The home, which is located at 209 Woodland Drive in Plains, Georgia, is now part of the Jimmy Carter National Historic Park, but it won't be open to the public until the passing of the President and First Lady. The home will then become a presidential museum that the couple have actively participated in creating. Jimmy Carter is the first U.S. President to have lived to the age of 95, and as of today, he's the longest-lived president in American history.